All righty. Yay. Here we go.
And they let me know I was being recorded. Okay.
Yes, it did, didn't it?
Yep.
Welcome back as I continue my Black History Month series called Living History, because there are so many incredible people walking amongst us in the St. Louis region that I like to call living history. And my next guest is definitely one of them. According to the National Archives, we've heard about the Great Migration. I hope you have anyway, but it was one of the largest movements of people in US history from the South to Northern, Midwestern, and Western states from about 1910 all the way up to, according to the National Archives, the 1970s. African Americans were leaving, escaping racial violence in the South and looking for economic opportunity. Now, I bring that up because I believe that if he was covering the Great Migration, we would have had incredible photos. And there are some good photos, but he would have been one of those who was documenting the Great Migration. He is Wiley Price, member of the Missouri Photojournalism Hall of Fame. He is a living legend, as honored by the Greater St. Louis Association of Black Journalists. The St. Louis Press Club named him Media Person of the Year. He is the staff photographer at the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper. Wiley, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm looking behind you and I see that is just a drop in the bucket of the number of awards you've received over the years, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It certainly is. I've got a closet just behind this wall that probably has 55 awards from the Black journalist alone in St. Louis. And I mean a lot.
So then let's go back to the first camera. You told me this story before, but the camera you got as a gift that really set you on this path.
Right, and not so much a gift, but just a friend loaning me something that he didn't use. It was literally sitting on the table, and I said to him, I said, Leonard, what are you doing with this camera? He said, nothing. He said, I just play around with it. And he even said to me, he said, if you want to, take it with you for a couple of days. I was like, okay. I had it for 2 weeks. And when I gave it back to him, before I gave it back to him, I said to my mother, I am trying to assemble some money to buy a camera for myself. And she went, what is this camera business? You know, it's the first time I ever seen it. She was like, why a camera? I said, because I think I have something here that would interest me. And she was like, okay. So about 4 months later, I got a Vivitar XC3. And literally the rest is history, because every time I took a picture and got the roll back, it looked like something I didn't do.
Really?
I didn't recognize what I had shot. I said to myself, when I took this picture, it didn't look like this. So what am I doing? I had to understand what was actually happening through me creatively. I really had to understand that. And that's what made me want to stay with it.
So set the stage though. How old are you at this time that you borrowed this friend's camera?
I am all of 20.
So at this time, you probably already have some sense of where you think you want to go in life.
I was a classical trombonist, literally. I mean, totally involved. I was a classical trombonist. I was headed that way. And the camera stopped me for a second and said, I want to take a look at this first before you complete that trip. But I mean, yeah, I was totally connected to the horn.
Wow.
And I have a huge jazz background on my horn, but classical was actually coming to me. I was understanding it now because I was in school and they were explaining to you how symphonies work and why it's written this way. And that's when you go, oh, okay, I get it now. You know, wow. I'm not just listening to a piece and I have no idea where we're going with this. Once it was explained to me how things work, that's when you kind of settle in and go, okay, I get the path that I'm really on now. And then that path got interrupted like some 4 years into school. And my mother even came to me one day, she said, what is this with, you don't have a full schedule of classes now in college. I'm like, well, I'm trying to take this photo course and I'm also working at UMSL student newspaper, so I really don't have time to be a full-time student. And she was not happy with that. And so she said, you need to make a choice here. What are you gonna do? And that same year, the sports information director introduced me to the St. Louis American, the St. Louis Argus, and the St. Louis Sentinel simultaneously.
Wow.
When he threw them down on the desk, he opened up the St. Louis American and said, look at this picture they ran. It was a kid I had from UMSL sliding into home plate. and they ran the picture across the sports page, full column, full page. I had never had a picture that wide, and not since, that went across the entire sports page. And I went right down to the American unannounced and asked to speak to the managing editor, who did not want to talk to me. His name was Benny Rogers, and the secretary sent me back to my car with a note that he would call me later. She comes running out to my car and she goes, "Mr. Price, I'm sorry, but Mr. Rogers would like to see you for a second." I walk into this old man's office and he looks up at me and he goes, "Jesus Christ, you look just like your father."
Wow.
And in my mind, I was like, yes, I'm in.
Now you got to tell us about your dad.
Yeah. My dad was the first Black radio personality in St. Louis in 1944. So when I started elementary school in 1961, teachers were coming down to my classroom, wanting to take a peek at me, and I had no idea why. So I let this go for a few days. I happened to sit with my mother at the dinner table. Teachers were coming into my room, Mom, staring at me for some reason and looking at me. And she looked right over at my father and she said to him, "We need to explain to your son his father's history, and we need to do it tonight." And that's when I found out that my father was on the radio. Before that, I had no idea, because my father was off the radio by the time I was born. You know, he'd been off for about maybe a decade. So this had never come to me before. And even when teachers were excited about seeing me, I was not excited because I didn't get it. And
so they never told you who he was?
No, until that moment in kindergarten, when my mother started putting out all these black and white pictures. You need to see who your father is. And that's when I started getting it. And even then I wasn't impressed because it wasn't television. I'm a kid. You said my father was on the radio, so you can't see the radio.
That's terrible.
And I remember so many people on the radio because my father listened to the radio. I remember Charlotte Peters. I remember all these people on KMOX radio. I remember Russ Davis's Playhouse. This is going back. I met Russ Davis one time at the Chase, and he knew I didn't know who he was. And when I told him who he was shocked. He said, "How do you know me?" And I explained myself. And he was like, "I remember that name." It was just so funny. He was looking at me like, "Son, you don't know me." I was like, "Yes, I do." And even when I said Charlotte Peters, he knew I was listening to the radio, because what Black child knows who Charlotte Peters is?
Yeah, what child?
Right, and especially from the radio.
So at that point, then, I mean, you're kindergarten, so you really even don't know how to give it the weight.
I don't. I gave it the weight when I got to college, because now I'm out in the community, I'm going places. And actually after college, because people started realizing who I was again when I started shooting for the American. Like, especially when I first started, when I wasn't working here, I was freelancing. Somebody would go, "Why do I think I know your name from somewhere?" And I would go, "Maybe because my father was on the radio." And they go, "Oh, that's right." You know, and they were just stunned to see me standing in front of them. And even this one lady said to me, she goes, "You look exactly like your father did when he was your age."
Wow.
You won't believe this. I met my father's high school girlfriend, and she was 92 years old. And I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yes, your father and I lived on the same block." I was like,
she recognized you?
She recognized my name and walked over to me. And I said to her, "You went to school with my father?" She said, "Not only did I go to school with him, we lived on the same block. I lived on the other side of the street, and your father was my first boyfriend."
Oh my Lord. That's some history for you, Wiley.
Very much so. Very much.
Tell us your father's name and the station that he worked for.
Wiley Edward Price II. He called himself Mrs. Price's boy on the radio. He was on WTMV, which broadcasts out of East St. Louis in the old Broadway Hotel, which as you get off the highway going into East St. Louis, the building is right there.
Right.
And he also worked at WTMV and KSTL.
He has stories to tell. Did he?
Luckily for me, because Benny Rogers knew my father personally, I would tell my mother stories that Benny would tell me about my mother and father, and my mother would look around at me and she goes, "I forgot about that. Who told you this story?" I say, "Benny Rogers." And I finally got them to meet. But when my mother finally met Benny, I've been working at the paper almost 4 years, when she finally met him. And she didn't recognize him, but she recognized young pictures of him that I got out of the photo files here at the paper. She goes, "I recognize this man's face as a young man."
My goodness.
So
at what point do you become a musician though? And who is it that has given you the musical background in your family?
We just moved to University City from the city in fourth grade. In fourth grade in University City is when you're allowed to choose an instrument and play a musical instrument. I didn't get to choose it. My parents chose my instrument. Nobody plays trombone. And it was the first time there was a line drawn in the sand between me and my parents. I couldn't understand why they wanted me to play an instrument that nobody else plays. And my mother said to me, that's exactly why you should play the trombone. Nobody plays trombone. You can always find a trumpet or a sax player, but never a trombonist. True. And my mother was right. When I got to be older, like in junior high school, and we were starting to pull band together in the educational system, we had 1,000 trumpet players, 1,000 saxophone players, 3 trombones. And me and those 3 kids stayed together all the way through high school.
Wow.
It was just like 4 or 5 of us, but there were always trumpet players who came in to play trumpet and then dropped the instrument in school somewhere along the line, 1 or 2 years in. Me and a handful of kids actually stayed on the trombone right out of high school.
And where did you go to high school?
I went to
University City High? Okay.
University City. Yes.
Which is historic. The number of people still have, you guys still have reunions that are.
My high school was such a special place. I actually did my college years in high school. In my sophomore year at U City, when you have a homeroom, when you first moved to the school, I got very upset when I realized the student body around me, the student body that was already there, was very politically astute. I was not. I did not care about politics, didn't want to be involved, but the student body was.
And you were upset because why?
Because now that is the culture of the school. I felt an intellectual environment that I was not ready to be a part of. Like even our bands won Best Band of the Year in state band competition like 12 years in a row. To the point when I got there as a sophomore, band competition was canceled because no other bands around the state wanted to compete against University City. And the one reason why we were so good, half the St. Louis Symphony lived in University City. They would tutor us for free.
Wow.
We got that kind of, at 7:30 in the morning, we got tutored for a half hour by St. Louis Symphony staff people, and they were teaching us how to play our music better. And we were so good, we would bring in national composers and play their music, and they were shocked at our talent to being in high school. And they realized that these kids are very serious. And we were a functional group of students that took our lives very seriously. And even a good friend of mine now, who's a councilman in University City, he said, I worked under the pressure of people knowing where I went to school and the class that I graduated with. And I understood that. Because when I went off to college at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire, my counselor said to me, we are so proud to have a student from University City High School in St. Louis, Missouri. And I leaped out of my chair and I said, ma'am, excuse me, but with all due respect, I am not that student. And she said to me, of course you are, you're sitting in my office. And that's what made me kind of realize, oh, maybe I am. But that kind of pressure and knowing what she meant, I was like, no, I don't need that kind of pressure at 18 years old. Sorry, I just don't want it.
But you had gone through, you had so many resources that were.
Oh, my own personal trombone teacher was the second trombonist in the symphony. And this is a man who loved me like I was his own child. And I knew that as a child because I met him in 4th grade. I didn't want to take lessons from him because he played trombone. I loved the man's personality. I just didn't want to be around him because you teaching me an instrument I have no interest in. And he taught me how to be interested in the trombone. And you know how? He noticed that I like low brass instruments. He put on Gustav Holst's The Planets, Mars, that particular movement of that symphony.
Yes.
It is brassy. It is, the brass are breaking, shattering the speakers. That hooked me. He knew how to hook me into the trombone. So he started making me listen to low brass pieces in symphonies, Bach, Beethoven, all this brass stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm in. So it's what
in the 4th grade, he hooked you in that way.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Wow.
My father suddenly passes away in 6th grade, and the man came and snatched me up. And this is before he and his wife even had children. And I knew he was doing it. He made me play a recital piece at my spring concert in 6th grade against another trombonist who he knew I was better than, but he showed me that I could compete against this kid. And to this very day, this kid is my best friend.
Well, let's back up, because I'm sure everybody heard you say that your father passes away in the 6th grade.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So it is kindergarten where you learn who he was.
Right.
And he is gone a short amount of time later. And
Right.
so aren't you glad that you did get to know who he was before he left?
Very much so. And I'm even gladder as an adult, because when I meet other adults in my father's generation who are clearly have limited time left, they have told me things about my father's personality and who he was publicly that gave me a better focus of who the man was as an adult. I mean, imagine this. My father is sitting with the then city editor of the St. Louis American when he meets my father, when he meets my mother. My mother and my aunt walk into a place called the Glass Bar, a jazz social club in St. Louis City over on Leffingwell near Olive. And my father is sitting with the city manager and the editorial cartoonist of the paper. My mother walks in with my aunt, and Benny said, your father looked up and went, who is that? And Benny said, I have no idea. And my father said to Benny and to this other guy, Bill Feeman, I'm going to go find out. And that's literally what happened. My mother walked into my father's life with my father sitting with 2 staff people from the St. Louis American. Before I'm even conceived, this is already in place. You talk about the Lord working in mysterious ways. This is almost a movie. There's no way you meet my mother and he's sitting with 2 people from the paper that I would spend the rest of my life with as an adult.
My goodness. So many of us know who have seen you in action that you are so hardworking. I can look up and you're in one spot in a room at an event taking pictures, and then 2 minutes later you are clear across the room. You're stealth. Very, very hardworking. And I'm so curious if you have tried to get a sense of how you have been able to accomplish what you've been able to accomplish in your life.
Yes, and the reason is, and this is truly the foundation of why I do what I do. As a photojournalist, and I use that word all the time because people assume I'm a photographer, and I am not. I'm a photojournalist.
I said staff photographer.
Yes. And
he's a photojournalist at the award-winning St. Louis American newspaper, Wiley Price, ladies and gentlemen.
The reason why I work so hard at my job is because people don't really respect photographers because you're taking pictures. And a very intelligent woman told me this, and I was shocked by what she said, but I agreed with her. That woman happened to be my mother. And she said to me, you got to remember something. You take pictures for a living. People look at people with a camera and go, any idiot can do that. And this is long before cell phones now. This is in 1979 when I'm noticing that people don't really respect me because you're just taking pictures. Kind of like, take a picture, please, and get out the way, sir. We're trying to see the person that's talking, that kind of deal. So it's taken me some decades to gain some respect. When I walk into a room, people know that I'm here to seriously get the story pictorially. Like even I have been said that to my face many a time. Why do you always look so serious? You're just taking pictures. And people look me right in the face when they say that and walk away from me like I should get a life. I mean, really, it happens to me all the time. All the time. People go, but you're just taking pictures. You're not a reporter. I'm like, but the images is almost more important than the story when you really look at the gravity of what is happening here.
I think that the images draw out more emotion than the story.
If you can catch it.
Well, that's true.
One big problem with Black newspapers historically is they've never had photojournalists working for them. They've had photographers. Photographers sometimes are used to posing a shot.
Right.
When things are moving around, they get uneasy about that. Like I have a couple of wedding photographers that I know really well, and they always say to me, I can't do what you do because you don't stage anything. You're shooting it as it happens, and there's too much commotion going on in front of you to really home in and catch it. But you do it with ease, and they respect me for that. And sometimes when my friends go buy an expensive camera from a professional camera shop, they wind up returning it because they realize I spent all this money on this camera, and this is it's much harder than I thought now that I'm behind the viewfinder. Right. And especially when my friends say to me, you and I were at the same event last week. I didn't get anything like you got, and I don't understand how you got that. And I go, and that's when I say to them, now you understand the complications of taking a picture.
So let's go back to college when you are disappointing your mother greatly, let's be frank, and you are taking fewer music classes, and now you are taking more photography classes. At what point do you leave music completely behind?
I didn't leave music completely behind until I started working at the American, because I suddenly realized the job was throwing a shadow over something else I wanted to do. And I couldn't do both. I realized that very quickly. I couldn't do both. I couldn't practice. You always know when you're talking to a real musician when they complain about not having enough time to practice.
That's good.
Most musicians who play by ear, they don't look at it that way because they haven't been classically trained, or should I say, trained on their instrument with an educational background to it.
Got it. Okay.
It's a big difference. When people go, I don't play anymore because I don't have time to practice, I know instantly, you're a serious musician. When you don't play anymore because you don't want to, I get that. You left the instrument behind. But like for me, like the running joke with myself is, when I hear the Star Spangled Banner at a sporting event, in my mind, I am humming the third trombone part. I do it all the time because I'm connected to the instrument still. You know, it's like, I say I'm not connected, but really I'm still plugged into the wall, into the trombone. But everywhere I go, I listen to music totally than most people in the room because I know what I'm listening to.
Yeah. Do you still play?
I have walked into high schools listening to bands and say to the trombone players, hey, excuse me, first trombone, you're sure? And the band director will turn around and look at me and say to me, you played. Or I played some instrument, because for you to blurt that out in a room in which you know no one, and you're calling out a specific person, and the conductor knows that, they know you play and you're classically trained. You are.
So do you still play?
No, I do not. But you don't lose your ear. I know when somebody's flat and sharp. I know it.
Do you miss it?
Yes. I wish I had time, because now that I've been away from it now for almost 30 years, and it's coming back to me. When I'm watching TV, or especially if I hear something on TV that I played before and it's classical, me and the trombone have a direct connection. When I sit in Power Hall and listen to the in unison chorus, I sometimes forget they're there, and that's what I'm there to shoot, because I'm really listening to the orchestra, and I'm particularly focused in on the trombone players on a piece that I know the trombone part, and I know you guys are just over there killing it, and it sounds so good.
Wow,
it really
that's wonderful. When you then, as you move into your career as a photojournalist, are you aware of the difficulties you're about to face working at a Black newspaper that covers the African-American community?
No, not at all. I was so far away from what I was actually about to experience for the rest of my natural life. I had to talk to my mother, had to talk to other photographers, the managing editor here, because I didn't realize that when I walk up to a person to ask them for their name after I introduced myself and shot their picture, the hostility was kind of a shock. No, thank you, I'd rather not be in the paper. It's kind of like, what? No, I mean, it's confrontational. And if it's the one thing that I've learned as a photojournalist being in the streets of the African-American community in St. Louis, Missouri, I am an expert at de-escalation. I am the best that there is at it. Even police officers who walk over when they hear this conversation going on and realize I'm involved, they look at me and they go, well, you really handled that well. Or they'll say to me, why do you let people talk to you like that?
Why are people hostile? Do they not want to be seen? And what's the deal?
No, it's bigger than that. When you work primarily in a underserved community, there are a lot of balls in the air that come along with that. Lack of education, lack of employment, lack of decent employment. You know, education comes first. You get a good job because you've been somewhere through an educational system, and this is why you have this job. This is why this job pays this kind of money. When you're walking around with people who have not experienced that, there are other things that weigh in on them that they walk around with. And it comes out of their mouth when somebody walks up to them that wants to get their name, and because they were playing with the child in the park or doing this at this event, and why did you choose me? And what is this picture going to be used for?
Right. There's a level of suspicion
Oh,
and lack of trust and
you know how in journalism,
with systems.
yeah, in journalism, they teach you that it's not appropriate to talk someone into being in your paper or on your TV show because they should want to do it. I don't work that way. I break all the journalism rules. I have to talk people into letting me run their picture in the paper because they don't understand the weight of what they did and how the positive look it will have on the community that you live in will see it.
Right.
Like something as simple as a father playing with his son in Fairgrounds Park. On many occasions, that has been a serious confrontation with me because I want to know, why are you taking a picture of me with my son and who are you? And then when I tell them who I am, they don't know the paper. Now, there's another explanation I need to go through. I normally whip out my phone and show them the paper, the cover. They normally recognize it. Most people don't, which makes me continue the conversation because now I really want to convince you that you want to show you and your son playing in the park without anybody else around. This is not a special occasion. You went home, grabbed your son, and you took him to the park.
Yeah.
And I normally say to young Black men, Black people need to see this because Black men have a terrible reputation about taking care of their children.
Right.
And that's what normally gets them. If they're really listening to me, they go, oh, well, yeah, you're right. I get that.
They know that to be true.
And particularly if I have to go further into it and say, are you on a good relationship with the child's mother? And they say no. I go, all the more reason.
Yeah.
You be letting me use this picture in the paper because this is a positive thing. You're doing a good thing. And you're not at a event. There's not 1,000 people here. It's you and your son.
It's not staged.
That's right. And there's only 5 people in the park right now. So this is a good thing. And then I go, oh, okay, I get it. And sometimes people call me on the phone after the paper comes out and go, you were right. My mother-in-law is so pleased with me right now. I'm on such good terms with my family, this, that, and the other.
Wow.
Because of that one situation.
Yeah. That you had to convince them to.
That's the one person I have convinced that if this ever happens to you again, now you see the big picture of this.
So Wiley, then that gives us a taste anyway. And I know because I used to be a columnist in the St. Louis American newspaper. Give us a sense of your attitude as to why the Black media is so necessary and is so integral to the Black community.
The one thing you realize, particularly in journalism, this is so true. People do not recognize where they are in their lives and who they're around in their neighborhoods and in their cities. People watch it on TV or they hear something on the radio, oh, that's really cute. But when it comes to being involved in it, then they get the big picture. Like I always say, I'm well known among African Americans who go to the same public and civic events. Like the same people go to all the NAACP and Urban League dinners. You see those people elsewhere at the same kinds of events. But outside of that circle, which to me in the African American community in St. Louis is probably 10,000 folks. Mm-hmm. We all go to the same events all the time. Mm-hmm. You don't know me. We've never met, but we see each other from across the room all the time. Those are the people that know me. When I'm walking through the streets of St. Louis in the African American community, nobody knows me. They just don't. And sometimes when I walk up to people and introduce myself, they chuckle because they're surprised that I think that they don't know who I am. And they go, Mr. Price, we know who you are. And I'm surprised by that. And I normally tell them. And then I tell them why, and they go, oh yeah, I get it. Because the honest to God truth is, African Americans don't read.
Yeah.
We watch TV and we listen to the radio, but we don't read. And therein lies your problem. We do a very good job of putting information that is necessary for the community to understand and to follow, but very few people are getting the information because it's in a newspaper. It's not on TV.
Right.
And the only way you're going to get that information to people is for them to go pick the paper up. So you do all kinds of things around that to entice them to come to the paper. And those are the things that people...
And one of those things is the newspapers in education program that, so you're getting the newspaper into the hands of school children in their classrooms and teachers are using it. And that's helpful.
Yeah, and most importantly, teachers are using it. They really are using it. And teachers always say to me, oh no, this is not a stage thing. I use this weekly. And I go, okay, this is great. Because
Mm.
when I started going into the schools, I was hoping that they were really using it. And they was like, why did you think we wouldn't be using this? And I said to them, because it's in the newspaper, that's why. You know, it's not something that you can go to an app and there it is on the screen. No,
Right.
you have to go to a hard copy, open it up, and show children that this is a newspaper, comes out every week, and you can find information in it that will educate you, even as a grade school student. It's hard to sell something that's necessary to the community. It really is.
How difficult has it been all these years to
Very,
maintain your level, because your level of excellence has never wavered?
very, because it's taken me a long time for people to take me seriously. I had to start winning a lot of awards, and it kind of like came, like by 2000, I was getting awards almost every other year, and it made people pay attention. Like so many times people have said to me, I never looked at you as being an outstanding photographer until I started noticing the awards you were winning. People say that to my face, not realizing that it's kind of insulting.
Yes, not kinda, it is.
But they don't mean to be, but they're telling me the truth. Like, my God, I had no idea you were this good all this time until you started winning awards. And they're looking at me like, I can't believe you won awards and you work at a Black newspaper. Even white journalists have said that to me. Like, you know, you work at the American, Black newspapers aren't really taken seriously because of the way they look. And I go, yeah, but this one is different. And I used to always say that to people, this one is different.
Right.
You know, do you read us? Well, if you don't read us, then that's why you don't know. They go, oh, but all you all are just alike. All of you all are not. That's like saying all Black people are just alike. We are very diversified.
So you have been told all of you all are alike?
Yes, I have been told by Black people, there is nothing in a newspaper that really warrants a Black person to read it on a weekly basis. And I go, you are so wrong. You are assuming something that's a stereotype from the 50s and the 40s. And even in the 50s and 40s, Black newspapers were very important. It was in the 60s and 70s when they started to lose their grip on the community, because integration does that. It loosens things up. I mean, prime example, when you look at the athleticism in the St. Louis public schools now, it's practically gone, because all those kids are in DSEG now. They're in the county. Yeah. Some of like, you know, Parkway's best sprinters live near Sumner. That's the way you look at that. Yeah, you know, like, that school has a sprinter. Why? Because the kid lives next door to Sumner, but he goes
diluted. It's been diluted.
Yes. Yeah. And in the African American community, Black papers would have a lot more substance and a higher talent rate if they could afford to pay people like a daily pays them. You don't have to run to a daily if the Black newspaper is paying $80,000 to start. Right.
But even with, I mean, that's the sad reality.
Very sad.
The stories and the coverage, the work that you do, you are still the best of the best.
And there's a reason for that, because I have donated my entire day to my job, which brings up a lot of issues, particularly when it comes to family. I have paid a serious price for this success through not being in my family's company, where most people are after 5:30. My boys have been thrown in the backseat of their father's car and driven to a fire, a shooting, a homicide, because that's where I need to go. And I believe that my kids needed to see that, because you live in this community. This is what's going on in your community. Yeah. Your father is showing you the bloodthirsty truth of what is happening in your community. Wow. And because of that, they were raised feeling much safer in their environment because they're aware of it. Yeah. My son, my oldest boy, Jamie, once said to me like 10 years ago, he said, Dad, I had to be in my 30s when I realized what a great job you did of running us around, showing us all this so-called bad things in the community, because it is such a fabric, so well woven into the community. I needed to see this so that when I got older, I wasn't so, you know, shocked by it. He said, because some of my African-American friends are, and it's really unfortunate, but, I'm sorry about that.
You're at work.
It's the reality of it. It's the reality of it that these things happen and you need to be aware of it so that you're not walking around with your head in the sand thinking that everything is hunky-dory, and it's not. And my sons really thank me for that, because they just say to me, Dad, I have to explain this to all my friends all the time. And I'm thinking, you were explaining this to me when I was in grade school. I said, because people walk around and think, like, that's how I got the job at the American. I came to the American thinking I knew the African-American community. 5 assignments in, Carol, I realized I knew absolutely nothing. I was 24. I came into this job like, oh, please, I so got this. I'm in the Black community. I know my people. What do you all need? Please come to me. I mean, really, I even had to sit down with my mother and say to my mother, I thought you raised me to be more in the community than I've actually been. And she looked at me and she said, I did, but you are assuming something. I'm like, and what assumption is that? She said, you are assuming that you are the only one who doesn't know what is going on in your community. And she said, we are all in that boat together, Black and white. Nobody truly knows.
Right, because everybody's like this.
There you go. And she said, you go to everything. People don't go to everything. They go to some things and they choose what they want to go to.
Right.
And like I've even said, prime example of this. We had 3 meetings from bi-state of them changing the way Grand was going to be fixed. They were going to slow down traffic on Grand. We had 3 meetings, and all 3 meetings, nobody came. Like 12 people showed up at every meeting. And I said to the woman from bi-state, we're going to get phone calls when you all start doing this, because people are going to be complaining, you didn't do anything to let us know this was going to happen. And you did. You had 3 meetings. And it was spread out over 3 months. So you had time. Nobody came. That's exactly what started happening. We started getting phone calls. Why didn't somebody tell bi-state to let the public know you're going to start doing this to Natural Bridge and Grand? I'm like, they did. They had 3 meetings. I was at all 3 of them. Nobody came. So
talk to me about your eye. How you do. I've seen you stage photos, you know, they're the CEO, the major fundraiser, you know, that happens. But when you are out there in a fluid event, a fluid situation, talk to me about your eye. What are you looking for?
I'll tell you how I developed my eye. I developed my eye from looking at everybody else's pictures. I have never looked at my work and said to me, you can do this. You don't need to look at anybody else's work. Just keep your head down and do your job. No, you get good at looking at everyone else's work. I don't care what anybody says. You don't get good from being on an island by yourself. No, you get good from looking at everybody's work. Even when you get to the point where you say to yourself, I'm a better photographer than this individual, I still look at that person's work. When I see people around me shooting and I know that they work for a publication or they're going to post to Facebook, I look at it because I can always spot something in somebody else's work. And I say to myself, I didn't see that. How did I not see that? The person was right in front of me and I did not see that. And I know I'm doing it correctly because people will say to me, I was at that event. When I saw a picture in the American, I was like, when did he do that? I didn't see that. So I know I'm right. And like I always say to people, I have to pay attention. I'm a hyper guy. I suffer from ADD. I know this. So when I get to work, when people say to me, you always look so serious when you're at work. I said, because I'm the kind of guy that can be easily distracted and not see the shot that I was really looking for. And when you're looking for shots like that, they don't happen often. You got to really catch that moment.
Right.
And especially like when I'm shooting sports, it's always funny to me when I'm shooting something like football or basketball, I got a great action shot and I see the photographers behind the action going like this. Or looking down at the camera. They're looking somewhere other than what's in front of them. And I had a photographer call me once and he says to me, you make me pay attention. You had a picture in the paper a couple of weeks ago on the sports page, and I saw myself chimping. Chimping is a term photographers use for looking down at the camera, looking at what they've just shot, as opposed to looking up and paying attention to what is happening right now. Every photographer does it. But it's called chipping because they mean like champies. You're going, ooh, 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 ooh. You're so amazed at the great shots you took, you're actually missing one as it's happening.
Wow. So
I always catch photographers chimping and you missed the shot. You know you missed it because I got you in the background and the picture's right there in the paper.
My goodness. So you never look away.
I hardly never look away. Even when I'm talking to somebody, I'm looking at what I'm shooting at. If I'm not looking over your shoulder, I might be looking at you like this, but I'm turning back to make sure I'm not missing anything. Now, like for football and basketball, there's timeouts. You got time to talk. But other things, you know, when the game starts going, you don't have time to talk. You can talk to me, but I'm not going to be looking at you. I'm going to be looking at the game.
I have noticed you are watching who is who, right?
Yes.
So, for instance, if the governor were in a room, you know, you're gonna follow the governor and who he is talking to and get that natural conversational shot as it happens. So I've noticed you do that. But you also, you say that people say you're very serious. Of course, you and I have known each other for a very, very long time.
Right.
And so I've seen you not serious. I've seen you enjoy the work, enjoy the people.
That's really my personality. People always say to me, you're such a happy guy. I used to get bullied in school.
Really?
For being a happy guy, yes. Other young men would always say to me, why are you always so damn happy? Because I always knew I had something to be happy about. And this is really kind of like stepping away from this, but the loss of a parent when you're young, it refocuses you real quick.
Right.
And I lived in a happy household when both my parents were walking around with me. I knew that. When my father died, I said to my mother, decades later, I said, when my father died, it was a horrible event for me. But what was worse was looking at my mother, who always looked to me like, I got this. Yeah. For the first time, I saw her on her knees, like, I don't have this.
Wow.
And I said to my mother, I said, it was the most shocking thing a kid could experience, knowing your mother always has it. And all of a sudden she doesn't. And she's broken down in front of you. She didn't walk into a room someplace and break down. I'm witnessing this.
Wow.
Right in front of me. And you know, when you grow up in a house where just 3 people, you, your mother, and your father. Now it's just me and my mother. My father was buried in Jefferson Barracks. We lived in University City. The longest ride I've ever taken in my life was that ride from the cemetery back to the house, because my mother cried almost uncontrollably all the way there.
Oh my gosh.
When we got to her home, I remember the chauffeur getting out the car, opening the door up, and me running around to help my mother out the car, because she was just that broken down. And me and a couple other people in our family that came with us. Well, I walked my mother into the house. I sat her down in the bed. She was crying. I went into my room. I'm listening to this for a good part of 20 minutes, but she finally kind of settles down. But something that you never forget. So it made me look at every day like, this is special. I'm alive. People who are close to me are alive and well. You know, this is special. So I've always had that personality. And my mother has brought that to me a couple of times. My personality is always so high. Yeah. I said to her, I could lose you in a moment's notice. So I need to enjoy all
Make me cry.
Oh, well, believe me, it made me grow up and grow up early. And in 6th grade, I should still be playing around. It focused me. It focused me. My mother had no problem out of her son raising him alone after my father died, because I promised myself I was not going to be a problem for my mother because my father wasn't in the house. I always carried myself like my dad was still alive and well. And my mother wound up dating again, and she always dated men like my father. And my mother's like, how come you always wanted me to marry these men? I said, because Mom, you picked men like Dad. The appeal was there immediately. Like even my mother got sick one time, she had cancer. The guy she was dating had to stay with me for 3 days because I was a sophomore in high school. That guy took care of me like my mother wasn't even in the picture. Wow. Mr. Washington. And I always said that, said, Mom, I love Mr. Washington because his focus was me, not you. And I appreciated that, and I saw it. So I respected him for it. And she always had great guys in her life that I'm like, man, this is easy. So, but that's why my personality is like that. And I believe that my job here, I had to do this job for the American. Nobody else could. Yeah. Because there's too many negative forces coming at you in this seat that people don't see. Or when they see it, they're shocked by it. Like I always say this is always funny to me. When somebody really goes off bad on me at a royal attended event, and if the police don't walk over, when I turn around after they diss me off and let me know I am not giving you my name and I don't want my picture in the paper, I turn around and step right into a white family who are looking at me like, because they can't believe I just got cussed out by this woman with her kids. And they're thinking, but everybody knows you. You've been at this paper for 1,000 years. I'm like, no, everyone doesn't know me. But this is what I always get because they don't know me.
So like, I suppose that then a part of that terrible experience, life-changing experience, does explain how you are able to handle all this difficulty that has come your way over the years.
Very much so, and particularly when it happens on a weekly basis. It never stops. The only time I had relief from this was when I worked at the journals. I went to the South Side and South County Journals for 5 years, from 87 to 93. And it was the most enjoyable time I had working because I went into another environment.
Yeah.
One that was not like the one I had left.
Yeah.
I ain't call this environment, this is a ground level environment.
Yeah.
It truly is. You meet people on a ground level environment.
That's front line. You're on the front line.
Right, very much so. The front of the front line. Even now I worry because there's so many people carrying guns now.
Yeah.
And I work in that environment.
Yeah.
And I've actually had to say that to the paper sometimes. Well, I didn't really go there because that was a situation that I was uncomfortable with. And for me, I always go with my first instinct. If I feel uncomfortable, I'm out.
Right.
Even if I was wrong, I'm out. I'm out.
You have to tell the story of the picture that is now in the Smithsonian of President President Barack Obama when he was here in St. Louis. What year? Set the scene.
It's July of 2007, and Barack Obama's already a state rep, just became one. And the AME Church, African American Episcopal Church, is going to have their national convention in St. Louis in July. And I'm talking with the bishop who's in that picture and actually facing me, which is what I think was so special about the picture, was the woman that asked me to do this is facing the camera when I shoot it. And I said two things to her when we were having the conversation, which was 4 days before the picture was about to be taken. We're in the America Center in one of the exhibition rooms having a meeting about this. And I said to her, it's unfortunate that where we're shooting it is going to be the worst light possible. And she said, why do you say that? I said, because in our convention center, the ceiling is a good 75 feet away, and we have orange simulated daylight that makes for a bad picture when it comes to brown tones in pictures. It turns in yellow and has all kinds of issues to deal with. And I'm going to probably have to flash it because the light is so far away. And she said to me, I would appreciate it if you would not use a flash. And I turned to her and I said to her, I understand what you're saying, but because we're talking about African Americans of different shades and different hairstyles, there are going to be shadow and light issues that you are not aware of, that the camera is very aware of, and your picture's going to wind up messed up.
Right.
I said, I'm going to try to bounce the light, but it can't bounce it off of something that's too far away. And that's exactly what happened. When I walked in the room, I was like, oh, no. And so I'm walking around, I'm shooting him. He met every bishop in there, and there were 33 of them. He shook hands with every one of them. He's
running for president at this.
Yes.
That's why he's,
We got to take this big group shot of 35 people, and I'm standing way back, and I got to throw this light across this big dark room. And I said to her, you are not going to like this picture, but hopefully the other one is better. And it was a crappy picture. But when he went, they went to put him in a prayer circle and do a prayer around him. I said to the bishop's daughter, stay with me. She goes, why? I said, because you don't know where to go. And if you stay with me, you'll be in the right place. And she went, okay. So sure enough, we stand there and I started moving away from him. And she goes, where are you going? I said, you can't take a picture of all the bishops and you're standing next to the state senator or state rep. She goes, okay. So I back up. I raise my camera above my head. I'm shooting wide like this, not looking through the viewfinder, which is what people are.
So you don't know what you're getting, really.
No, because like I said, the lady said to me, why are you raising your camera like that? I was like, ma'am, we're all 6 feet tall. You know, you can't hold your camera down here and get a picture of all these people crowded around him with their hands on each other's shoulder praying over this guy. So she didn't like the fact that I was standing so far back. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And I said to her, I have to stand far back, but otherwise I won't be able to see everybody that's praying over him. And she went, well, okay. So I stand back.
Did you not get on a chair at one point?
No, never did.
Okay.
Because there's 35 people in the room.
Because so it seemed...
I just raised my camera above my head and started firing shots.
And you're how tall? So this helps.
I'm 6 feet tall. When I raise my camera, I'm 6'6". So I have a wide angle lens on my camera. And I know to do this from doing it for so many years. I said to myself, center your camera where Barack is in the middle of your viewfinder, even though you can't see your viewfinder. You got to know when you adjust it that this is where I am. This is where I hope I am. So I fire off like 15 quick shots until my flash stops firing. I look down, I see that he's centered, but I don't like the way the picture looks. And I said to myself, I got something, let's get out of here. So I get back to the podium. I see a guy from USA Today. He goes, you got something special back there, didn't you? I said, I don't think so. He said, I got the strange feeling you did. And I left it at that. That night when I got home and put the pictures in my computer, that's when I realized what I had.
So that's hours later.
Hours later. When I looked at it on the screen, I said to myself, you have nothing but this guy standing among Black men and women praying over him. That's all you got. But when I saw it on the computer screen, I was like, oh, thank God. The emotional state on people's faces is what made the picture. Because you could tell everybody was in on this.
How does it then, it blows up? Talk about that. The picture itself became a story.
Yeah, you know, and it took a minute. It really did. It took a minute. But even somebody I went to your city with that lives in New York, she emailed me the picture without credit on it and said to me, I know you're a good photojournalist, but take a look at this. It was my picture. And I said to her, Denise, this is my picture. She went, Wiley, we've known each other for a long time. You don't have to lie to me and make up a story that this is your picture. I wound up having to send her the front page of the St. Louis American. And that's when she realized it was mine. Most people that have seen that picture did not know it was even taken in St. Louis. And they were kind of surprised because they were like, what was going on in St. Louis that you took a shot like this? I'm like, the then seated state rep was coming to visit a group of African Americans who belong to one of the largest churches in the United States. That's a good place to be. Wow. So that's why I took the picture and that's how we got it.
So then how does it get into the Smithsonian?
They called me. And the funny part about that was, of course, I did not believe it was the Smithsonian.
Oh, you thought it was a prank?
Oh, sure. And plus, I could tell that the woman was white. So I figured one of my friends is playing a joke on me. And I knew other photographers who are white that would do that to me. So I played along. And the lady picked up about 5 minutes into the conversation, me being kind of like almost flip about the situation. So she said, Mr. Price, I'm going to send you an email. I said, okay. And about 2 minutes later, I look up and the first thing I noticed was the Smithsonian logo rolling up. I was like, oh no.
You weren't rude?
No, I was not. But she said to me, Mr. Price, this happens to us every day. We're trained to let people know who we really are because nobody believes it's us.
Wow.
And that's how I got it. And it happened to me again, but it happened to me before, like 10 years before that, almost 20. I took a picture that won an award from the National Black Journalists Association, right as Bill Clinton became president. So when he became president, as a big publication thing, he just got in office, he sent a congratulatory letter to me because he had just got in office. The White House called me to make sure that I still worked at the paper and to make sure that their information was correct. It was a Black guy. I could clearly hear it was a Black guy. So I instantly knew this is a joke. So I'm talking along. I said to him, with all due respect, whoever you are, how long are you going to play along with this? He said, and I told him, I know you're not from the White House. He said, Mr. Price, he said, I get this every day. He said, I'm going to send you an email. But he said, but oddly enough, I'm from St. Louis. That's when I knew it was a prank. You are not from St. Louis talking to me from the White House. So I said, really? You know what I asked him? What high school did you go to?
And he said,
if he said Sumner or Sodan, I was going to know it was a joke because those two popular schools are thrown up all the time. He didn't say those two names. He said Beaumont. I knew this guy was telling the truth. Nobody says Beaumont unless you went there.
That is so funny.
And he said to me, I'm going to tell my mom this when I call her later on today. I wound up meeting this guy's mother 3 months later at the NAACP dinner. She walked right up to me. She said, Mr. Price, I have a funny story to tell you. And I was like, really? I can't wait to hear this. And that's when she told me. And we were laughing hysterically. I said, you're his mother. She goes, Mr. Price, my son. He goes, Mom, you're not going to believe this one.
Wiley, tell me, if you can, you've been a photographer, a photojournalist for so long. I know this will be hard to answer, but is there a photo that is the most moving or emotional that you have taken through these decades? I know there's more than one.
I don't have a favorite, but you know how I always look at my work? This is something that was unusual that you caught. And I always say to myself, you're so lucky that you were paying attention or that you caught it at this moment.
Huh?
And so therefore, I never walk around going, this is my favorite picture ever. My Obama picture is very, very popular.
Yeah.
I would not call it one of my favorite ones. but it meant something to me because it had such a religious power to it.
Yeah.
That's what I loved about it, was that I never thought I would take a picture that carried some religious power to it.
Right.
That one is it.
So much so, Wiley, that when President Trump either was running or was president, that mostly white pastors wanted to stage that very same thing and pray around him.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So you know that picture had impact.
I saw that picture happen with not Trump, but I think the senator from Texas. He had a rally in a church in Texas, and all these ministers gathered around him to take a picture that's similar to that one.
Yeah.
I saw that the AP photographer in Dallas took it. I called the Associated Press in Dallas, asked to speak to that photographer. He happened to be in the office, and I said to him, "You were unfairly duped and you don't realize it." And he didn't know what I was talking about. I emailed him the picture. He knew the picture. And I said to him, "I took this picture similar to this 15 years ago, and they tried to simulate it." And he said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't know what you're talking about." I sent him the picture, and on the phone, he said to me, "Oh my God." He said, "I gotta call my editor over here to see this." He said, "You're right." He said, I knew you were wrong." He said, "This is exactly what they did."
Yeah.
He said, "And it was me and about 20 other photographers that took this picture." I said, "Yeah." I said, "They knew exactly what they were doing."
Exactly.
He said, "Yes, they did."
So that is a picture that moved you. What were you going to name any others that hold a special place?
No, because I easily forget. Sometimes when I'm going through my work, I see things that I took 10 or 15 years ago and say to myself, "You forgot all about this." I don't do a good job of remembering special pictures in my profession that I take.
You do it 7 days a week.
Yeah, I do. I really do.
And all around the country.
I easily forget. I'm not that impressed with myself. I always look at the paper. I go, "Okay, I got some good images in the paper this week. Some of these are really, really boring, but there's always next week."
Did you just say you're not impressed with yourself?
No, not at all. The show I have coming up this weekend, I just left a meeting for it before I got on the Zoom meeting with you, and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be all right, but I'm not really jumping up and down about this. And luckily for me, the guy that's doing it for me, with me, he was saying all these images work because this is really who you are. You are this guy. And I said to him, I said, I needed to hear that from somebody other than myself, because I would never say that to myself.
But you're also, I hope you know this, that you're a great storyteller and you tell the story with the photos, but verbally, you are also a great storyteller, because there is a story to all of the capturing these great images, not when they're, even when they're boring, there's a story, but these great images that you have captured. I mean, you were on the ground in Ferguson.
Mm-hmm. And Ferguson was always special to me because I always said to myself, please don't give them the obvious. Don't get all of the violence, all of the shooting, all of the mayhem. There's other sides to this that's a very calm and subdued message that needs to be seen around the violence. And it's funny you should say that, because I got invited to the University of Georgia's journalism school. And when I talked to the professor, I said to him, I said, please don't hope that I bring you a lot of blood and violence. I said, there was another side of that I want to show. And he said, Mr. Price, that's exactly why we're calling you. We're looking and we noticed that you were purposely shooting another side of this amongst all the violence that took place during the same moment. I said, yeah, I said, and that was being missed even by my paper. We were hungry for that action shot that showed, oh, this is really out of control.
Tear gas and Yes.
Yeah. And I said to them, I said, but there's another side to this that needs to be shown. And we're not really doing a good job of it. So what we did a lot of times was, those were in the photo essays that were on our website, but not published in the paper. So I was glad that they noticed that. And a couple other photographers said that to me. It's like, you're showing a side of this that not everybody's looking at. I was like, because everybody's addicted to the action. And there's more to this than that. Every violent action has a soft side to it that's happening simultaneously, actually.
Yeah.
You just sometimes can't see it or notice it.
Well, I am certainly so grateful for your eye, and that you have that you put down the trombone and picked up the camera.
So am I.
Even though I would love to see you in concert, I am grateful that you stuck with it and have become this award-winning photojournalist and friend in this community. Wiley Price, I like to say to all of my guests that you are indeed living history.
Thank you so much, girl.
Thank you, and congratulations on all of your success.
Thank you so much.
All right.